I still replay it all in my mind, trying to understand where it went wrong. When I first met Jake, I wasn't searching for anything, especially not a serious relationship. At 27, I was a recent art school graduate working as a freelance graphic designer in Denver, pouring all my energy into building my portfolio. I enjoyed my independence, my small apartment, and the freedom to take on whatever projects inspired me. But Jake was a force of nature. It was a completely ordinary Tuesday, and I was grabbing coffee at this quirky little place near a construction site where I was meeting a potential client about doing some branding for a new housing development. I remember I was running a little late, stressed about the presentation, and definitely needed caffeine. I was in line, chatting with the barista Sarah about this band I was dying to see that weekend. I'm usually pretty shy, but Sarah always made me feel comfortable, like we'd known each other for years. Looking back, I'm not sure what made me do it, but I was in a good mood. That's when I noticed him. Everyone seemed to notice him. He had this quiet intensity that drew your eye. He ordered a plain black coffee, so basic. And it would usually annoy me, but I don't know, there was just something about him. He was staring right at me. I caught his eye and smiled, and he practically froze, stumbling over himself to pretend he wasn't just staring. It was kind of endearing. "Looks like you could use more than just caffeine today," I blurted out without even thinking. To my surprise, he actually laughed, and it was a really nice laugh. "Yeah, it's been a long day, and it's not even noon yet," he said. We talked while we waited for our drinks, and it felt so natural, so easy. He was one of those rare people who could make you feel completely at ease, even if you just met. Before he left, I impulsively wrote my number on a napkin and handed it to him. "Call me sometime," I said, trying to act casual, but inside, my heart was racing. I'm pretty sure he texted me before he even left the parking lot. Our first date was at this small Italian restaurant that I adored. He told me later that it wasn't really his type of place, too girly for him, but he knew I liked it. We talked for hours. I remember telling him about my dream of opening my own design studio, the kind where I got to make art full-time, and how excited I was about my work, and he talked about his construction business, his ambitions, his family. He genuinely listened, making me feel like my dreams were important, like I was the most interesting person in the world, even though he had his own amazing things going on. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see him again. Everything happened quickly after that. Within a few months, we were inseparable. We spent our weekends exploring the mountains, trying new restaurants, even just sitting at home laughing at dumb movies. He made everything an adventure. For the first time, I felt truly understood, completely accepted for who I was. A year later, we got married. The wedding was small, just close friends and family, but it felt magical. Jake looked so handsome standing there, and I couldn't believe that he was mine. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Then we settled into married life, buying a house in the suburbs and started building a family. 2 years later, our daughter, Ava, was born, and then our son, Liam. I decided to stay home with them, throwing myself into motherhood with everything I had. I loved creating a loving, stable home for my kids. I loved being there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. Jake worked tirelessly to provide for us, often working long hours to grow his company, always putting our family first. From the outside, we had it all. We were the perfect family. I honestly believed it myself for a long time. But as the years went by, something shifted. Subtle changes, barely noticeable at first, that I chose to ignore, telling myself it was just the stress of raising kids and balancing work. I told myself it was just the daily grind, juggling the kids and the business. Everyone feels stretched thin sometimes, right? I noticed Emily started burying herself in her phone, but I didn't give it too much thought. She'd giggle at texts and brush it off with a "just Sarah." But then little things started piling up, subtle shifts I couldn't quite explain. She'd get prickly if I asked about her plans, or make little digs about how dull our life had become, how we didn't have as much fun anymore. I dismissed it as a phase, growing pains maybe. We still had so much going for us. 2 incredible kids, a beautiful home, a solid partnership. I told myself those tiny fissures were just that, tiny, insignificant, destined to fade with time. Now, looking back, I recognized them as the first cracks in the dam, signs of a much deeper problem I was determined to ignore. I think I just refused to see it. I clung to the idea of us being unbreakable, that nothing could jeopardize the foundation we built. I should have paid closer attention. Emily's girls' nights became increasingly frequent. She'd come home later and later, sometimes not until after midnight, and would practically bolt for the shower like she needed to scrub the night off her skin. I wanted desperately to trust her. She was my wife, after all. But the discrepancies were adding up. I remember one instance where she mentioned grabbing drinks downtown with Sarah and Amanda. Then, a few days later, I offhandedly mentioned it to Sarah's husband, Greg, at a school function. The look on his face stopped me cold. Emily was at a bar, he asked, confused. Sarah was home with the kids that night. I played it off, telling myself I must have misheard something. Maybe Sarah popped out earlier, or maybe Greg was just clueless. But deep down, a little seed of doubt had taken root. Emily's behavior at home also started shifting. She'd almost overcompensate after her nights out, cooking my favorite meals or showering me with compliments she hadn't offered in years. At first, I appreciated it, thinking she was consciously trying to put more effort into our marriage. But then I realized it wasn't about us. It was about her. It was guilt. Her phone became another source of unease. Emily had always been pretty nonchalant about her phone, leaving it lying around or handing it over to me to play videos for the kids. Suddenly, it was glued to her hand. She'd even take it into the bathroom when she showered. The notifications on her lock screen were switched off, something she'd never done before. I remember teasing her. "What? You got top-secret intel on there?" She laughed, but the look in her eyes was anything but amused. One night, after she returned from another girls' night, I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but this time, an insistent voice in the back of my head told me to look. It wasn't just a hunch. It was a heavy, sickening premonition that wouldn't leave me alone. I glanced at the screen and the words seared themselves into my memory. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Tonight was incredible. Mark." My heart hammered in my chest. I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. A part of me wanted to believe it was a joke, a misunderstanding, but I knew the truth. I picked up her phone, unlocked it, and scrolled through the messages. The things I read made my stomach churn. They'd been seeing each other for months, sneaking around behind my back. There were even pictures, selfies of the two of them cuddled together in places I recognized. One was taken at the restaurant we went to for our anniversary just a year ago. Another was at the park where we used to take the kids. It wasn't just the betrayal of her being with someone else. It was the desecration of the spaces that were supposed to be sacred to us, to our family. For what felt like an eternity, I just stood there, holding her phone, my mind reeling. I felt a wave of nausea, anger, and a profound sense of humiliation wash over me. How long had she been lying to me? How could she look at me, kiss me, and pretend everything was perfect while she was seeing someone else behind my back? It felt like a cruel joke, a betrayal I couldn't reconcile with the woman I thought I knew. When she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel and humming a tune, I was still standing in the kitchen, the cold tile a stark contrast to the burning anger inside me. She stopped short when she saw me holding her phone, her expression shifting from contentment to something akin to panic. "Max," she started, her voice wavering slightly. I didn't give her the opportunity to feign innocence. "Care to explain this?" I asked, holding the phone aloft. The color drained from her face. For a split second, I thought she might try to deny it, concoct some elaborate story, but instead, she simply stood there, mute. "Nothing to say?" I pressed, my voice measured, though I felt like I was about to explode. Finally, the words stumbled out. "Max, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way." "This way?" I repeated, incredulous. That was her primary concern? Not the fact that she had been unfaithful, but that I had discovered her infidelity. I shook my head, trying to process the sheer audacity of it. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, already dreading the answer. She hesitated, avoiding my gaze, then whispered, "A few months." I didn't believe her. I'd seen enough. The messages went back much further than that, a sickening timeline of betrayal etched onto her phone. "Why?" I demanded, my voice cracking with pain. "Why would you do this to us?" The excuses came tumbling out, a torrent of justifications and half-truths. "I don't know, things haven't been the same between us. You're always working." I felt so alone. Mark makes me feel alive again. Alive? That word stung more than any accusation, a sharp slap in the face. "Then why didn't you tell me?" I snapped, my carefully constructed composure finally cracking. "If you were so unhappy, why didn't you say something? Instead of sneaking around like a coward?" Her response was like a punch to the gut. "I didn't want to hurt you, Max. I do love you. I love our family. I just needed something more. Needed something more, as if I wasn't enough, as if the life we had built together, the promises we had made, were somehow deficient." I wanted to scream, to lash out, to grab the nearest object and hurl it across the room. I wanted to run away and never look back, but I couldn't. The kids were upstairs, probably immersed in a game or a book, blissfully unaware of the earthquake that was shaking our foundation. I couldn't expose them to this, couldn't let them see their mother completely unravel. So, I took a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of control, and asked, "So, what now, Emily? Do Do you expect us to just go back to normal? She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes, though I couldn't decipher if they were tears of remorse or self-pity. No, she said softly, but we can make this work. We don't have to throw everything away. I laughed, a short, bitter sound devoid of humor. Make it work? How? Do you seriously think I can just erase what you've done? She hesitated, her gaze shifting nervously, and then uttered the words that would forever be seared into my memory. We could try an open marriage. I stared at her, completely stunned. There was no apology, no desperate plea for forgiveness. Instead, she was calmly suggesting a way to continue her affair while remaining married to me. You have got to be kidding me, I said, my voice thick with disbelief and simmering rage. Max, it doesn't mean I don't love you, she insisted, as if those words could somehow magically absolve her of her actions. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to break up our family. I almost laughed in her face. The sheer audacity of her proposition was breathtaking. As much as I wanted to tell her to pack her bags and get out of my house, out of my life, I knew I couldn't afford to. We hadn't signed a prenuptial agreement, and she could take everything, the house, the kids, my business. Everything I had worked for would be at risk. So, I swallowed my pride, the bitter taste of humiliation coating my tongue, and said, fine. If that's what you really want, we'll try it. Her face brightened as if she had somehow won a victory. But I wasn't agreeing because I forgave her or because I thought this was a viable solution. I was agreeing because I needed time to assess the damage, time to figure out how to protect myself and my children, time to meticulously plan my escape from this nightmare. This wasn't going to be my life, not for long. The idea of her continuing the affair after suggesting an open marriage without guilt or respect was absurd. He dove headfirst into this open arrangement with Mark as if I hadn't just discovered her infidelity. It was almost laughable, the lack of effort she put into keeping up pretenses. She'd breeze out the door in the very dress she wore the night I confronted her, tossing a breezy, "Don't wait up," over her shoulder. Initially, I let him think I was simply going along with it, but I wasn't about to let him run roughshod over me. There was no way I was staying in this situation long term. I began building my case, knowing that if this went to court, I had to be prepared. Family law tends to favor mothers, and the last thing I wanted was to risk custody of Ava and Liam to someone who seemed to prioritize her boyfriend over their well-being. My first move was hiring a private investigator. I know it sounds dramatic, but I needed undeniable proof of how much time he was neglecting his responsibilities as a wife and mother. I instructed the PI to concentrate on his outings with Mark, and he was incredibly thorough. Within a week, I had photos of him and Mark at restaurants, stealing kisses in parking lots, even checking into a hotel. While the PI was working, I focused on being there for the kids. Not to weaponize them, but because I truly cherish being their mother. I volunteered to help with Liam's soccer team and made sure I didn't miss Ava's ballet recitals. On weekends, I took them to the park or planned little day trips to maintain a sense of normalcy and fun. I even started packing their lunches, slipping in little notes that said things like, "You're amazing," or "Good luck on your spelling test," just to remind them that I was present and supportive. He, on the other hand, seemed completely oblivious to my actions. He seemed more concerned with nurturing his romance with Mark than with what was happening in our own home. He'd ask about the kids half-heartedly, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. I started keeping a journal to document everything. Every missed dinner, every late night, every instance he brushed off the kids to run errands that conveniently stretched for hours. Amidst all this turmoil, something unexpected happened. Chloe, his best friend, reached out. Initially, it was just to see how I was doing. She mentioned hearing about the open arrangement and wanted to check in. I didn't think much of it at first, but as we continued talking, it became clear that Chloe had strong opinions about his behavior. "He's always been self-absorbed," Chloe commented during one of our conversations. "I don't know how you've tolerated it for so long." Hearing someone else acknowledge it, especially someone close to him, was incredibly validating. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that I wasn't irrational for feeling betrayed. Our conversations began casually but evolved into something more personal over time. Chloe shared her own frustrations with him, admitting she'd noticed the strain in our marriage long before I had. She told me he had a habit of taking people for granted and that she believed I deserved better. I was unsure if it was genuine sympathy or something deeper, but I felt seen and heard, and that meant a lot. One night, Chloe and I ended up meeting for coffee. I told myself it was simply a way to vent, to have someone to talk to who wasn't directly involved in the chaos of my home life, but as we sat there talking, I realized how comfortable I felt in her presence. She wasn't judging me or telling me to stay for the sake of the children. She simply listened. That coffee turned into more frequent encounters. Before I knew it, we were spending a lot of time together, grabbing lunch, going for walks, or just sitting in the car talking for hours. It felt good to have someone on my side, someone who saw me for who I am. And yes, I'll admit it, there was chemistry, a palpable connection between us. The turning point came one night when Chloe invited me over to her apartment. I'm not sure what I expected, but I didn't anticipate it feeling so natural. We talked, laughed, and eventually things took an unexpected turn. I felt desired, not out of pity or obligation, but because someone genuinely appreciated me for me. I knew it wasn't entirely ethical, considering the circumstances, but I didn't lose much sleep over it. He wanted an open arrangement, and I was simply playing by his rules. Of course, I wasn't flaunting it, but I also wasn't going to punish myself for it. Eventually, he found out. I didn't tell him, and Chloe didn't either, but I suppose he started connecting the dots when he noticed how much time I was spending away from home. One night, he cornered me in the kitchen. "Are you seeing someone?" he demanded, his tone accusatory rather than concerned. I didn't bother denying it. "Yes, Chloe." The blood rushed to her face. "Chloe, my best friend? How could you?" I just arched a brow. "How could I? Are you seriously asking me that?" "Take a good, long look in the mirror, Emily." She looked ready to burst a vein. "This is different," she shrieked. "You're supposed to be my husband and you're supposed to be my wife," I retorted, "but you forfeited all rights to that when you started creeping around with Mark. Don't try playing the victim card now." She stormed out of the kitchen, the door slamming with enough force to rattle the cabinets. I stood there for a beat, letting the heavy silence settle. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I'd reclaimed a sliver of my power. Emily wanted to play games? Fine, but I refused to let her dictate the rules any longer. After that, the atmosphere in the house chilled to a glacial level. Emily abandoned any pretense of being civil, and I dropped the charade of pretending I still cared. Our home transformed into a silent battleground, filled with tense standoffs and awkward near misses in the hallway. The only things anchoring me were the kids and, if I'm being honest, Chloe. She was my escape, a living reminder that there was a world, a life, beyond the wreckage Emily had created. I knew we couldn't keep living like this indefinitely. Something would have to break. But I was okay with playing the long game, knowing that with every calculated move, I was building the foundation for my future. The funny thing was, I saw the cracks in Emily's little fantasy with Mark long before she did. Initially, their affair had all the predictable trappings: secrecy, furtive glances, and that intoxicating thrill they probably mistook for something meaningful. But once she tossed the open marriage grenade into our lives, the secrecy vanished. And without the secrecy, the thrill seemed to fade right along with it. All that was left was a colossal mess. Mark, in the beginning, seemed completely invested. He played the part of the dashing rescuer perfectly, the stereotypical guy who loved the idea of sweeping Emily away from the supposed drudgery of her marriage. From what I could gather, he was some mid-level numbers guy who apparently believed his charm and a few upscale dinners were enough to make him irresistible. And for a while, it worked like a charm. Emily couldn't stop raving about how spontaneous and adventurous he was, as if she'd somehow landed a celebrity boyfriend instead of a man who probably spent his mornings hyperventilating over spreadsheets. But the moment their affair became public knowledge, Mark began to backpedal, slowly but surely. It was subtle at first, so subtle that Emily didn't even register it, most likely because she was still riding high on the novelty of her newfound freedom. I, however, noticed she'd come home looking deflated and distracted after waiting hours for a promised phone call. Then, one night, she stormed in from what was supposed to be a date, muttering under her breath and slamming the door a little too hard. She flung her purse onto the counter and let out this exaggerated sigh of frustration. "Mark's such a jerk," she announced, as if I were supposed to be shocked and offer my condolences. I didn't even glance up from the stack of bills I was sorting through. "Surprise, surprise," I said dryly. She shot me a glare but remained silent. Instead, she poured herself a glass of water and sat at the table, scrolling endlessly through her phone as if searching for some magical distraction. I almost felt a pang of sympathy for her, almost. As the next few weeks unfolded, Mark's waning interest became glaringly obvious. At one point, he completely stopped texting her, sending her spiraling into a state of near panic. I'd catch her pacing back and forth in the living room late at night, clutching her phone like a lifeline as if waiting for some earth-shattering message. Sometimes I'd hear her muttering under her breath, "Why is he doing this?" or "He said he was different." And honestly, I couldn't help but smirk, just a little. Then one evening, after I got the kids settled in for the night, I walked into the kitchen and found Emily sitting at the table with her laptop open, staring blankly at a new email she hadn't even started. Her phone was next to her, and she kept glancing at it, the way you do when you're hoping it'll ring. Something wrong? I asked, feigning a level of concern I definitely didn't feel. She let out another one of her frustrated sighs. Mark's been acting distant. I responded, doing my best to sound interested. That's a shame. She looked at me as if expecting me to offer some kind of comforting words. When I didn't, she huffed and turned back to her laptop. Of course, I knew exactly why Mark was pulling away. It wasn't exactly rocket science. Men like him are fueled by the thrill of the hunt, the forbidden allure of secrecy. Once the clandestine meetings were over, once their affair lost its cloak-and-dagger appeal, he simply lost interest. I guess Emily ceased to be his escape and became, in his eyes, just another woman with responsibilities and complexities. I certainly wasn't going to spell it out for her. She needed to face the truth on her own time. A few days later, I overheard her trying to reach him while I was close by. I couldn't make out every word, but her tone gave everything away. It reeked of desperation masked as nonchalance, clearly hoping for some reassurance. I caught snippets like, "Hey, were you thinking about maybe getting dinner this weekend? Oh, you're busy? Okay, no problem, perhaps next week then. I understand, work is demanding." As soon as she hung up, a dramatic sigh filled the room, followed by the thud of her phone hitting the sofa. The following weeks were a painful display of Emily attempting to resurrect what she imagined she had with Mark. She'd send these lengthy, thoughtful texts only to receive brief, dismissive replies hours afterward. Sometimes she wouldn't even get a response. She began dressing up more, putting extra effort into her appearance before seeing him, but came home progressively earlier each time, her spirit visibly crushed. I think the reality truly sunk in one evening when she showed up at his place unexpectedly. She had initially claimed she was meeting him for dinner, but when she returned in less than an hour, I knew something had gone terribly wrong. What happened? I asked, trying to remain neutral. She hesitated for a moment before muttering, "He wasn't even home." I raised an eyebrow, not buying it. "Did he know you were coming?" She avoided my gaze, simply grabbing a glass of water and retreating upstairs. From then on, Mark's name never crossed her lips. The effusive praise of his humor or how he made her feel disappeared completely. She started spending more evenings at home, constantly glued to her phone, seemingly searching for a distraction, a way to escape. One evening, while I was settling the kids into bed, Ava asked, "Why is Mom so sad lately?" I paused, unsure how to answer. "She's just going through a difficult time," I responded carefully. "Did she lose a friend?" Ava persisted. "Something like that," I replied, giving her a quick hug. It wasn't exactly a lie, in a way. Emily had lost someone close to her, someone she probably believed would be there forever. As Emily's relationship with Mark crumbled around her, I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it validated what I had known all along. She had gambled with our marriage, with our family, and she had lost. Now she was forced to pick up the pieces while I moved forward, one step closer to reclaiming my life. When I finally reached the decision to file for divorce, it was a meticulously planned move. I had spent months preparing, documenting everything, and ensuring all my affairs were in order. Every late night Emily spent with Mark, every dinner she missed with the kids, every dollar she spent on herself while I was covering all the bills, it was all carefully recorded. I knew entering a divorce without a prenuptial agreement was risky, but I was not going to let her walk away without consequences. The day the papers were delivered, I felt a complex mix of relief and apprehension. I knew what was coming, the tears, the arguments, the inevitable attempts to make me feel guilty. Predictably, Emily called me less than an hour after the process server left. Her voice was shaky, a blend of anger and desperation. "What the hell, Max?" she said, skipping the usual pleasantries. "You're really filing for divorce, just like that?" "It's not just like that, Emily," I responded, maintaining a calm tone. "You've had your fun. This marriage has been over for a long time. You simply didn't want to admit it." She attempted to argue, claiming we could work things out, but I wasn't having it. The chance to fix things had long passed. That evening, after a long, draining day at work, I walked into our kitchen and there she was. Emily. The kids, thank God, were upstairs in their rooms, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering speed below. Scattered across the countertop were legal documents, and Emily's face was a blotchy mess, red and swollen from crying. "You don't have to go through with this," she choked out, her voice cracking like thin ice. "We can salvage this. I've stopped seeing Mark. I promise. I already have. It was a stupid mistake, Max. A terrible lapse in judgment." I leaned back against the cool tile of the counter, crossing my arms, trying to project a calm I certainly didn't feel. "A lapse in judgment? Is that what you're calling it? This has been happening for months, Emily. And I gave you every opportunity to put an end to it and you chose not to. And now he's discarded you. And now it's done. The tears flowed even faster, a tidal wave of regret. She insisted, pleaded, that she didn't want to destroy our family. Think about Ava and Liam, Max. They need both of us. We can't just throw away everything we've built. I sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion. It was the same tired script she'd been reciting since the day I unearthed the truth. You threw it away, Emily, the second you decided Mark was more captivating than our children, than our life together. And now you're pretending this is somehow my choice. You're the one who detonated this bomb, not me. Instantly, the tears dried up, replaced by a flash of anger in her eyes. Fine, if this is really what you want, then don't come crawling back to me when our children resent you for tearing their family apart. That remark stung, I won't lie, but I refused to let her see it. Our children will be all right, I stated, my voice firm, unwavering. I will make absolutely certain of that. The following weeks blurred into a chaotic mess of legal papers, agonizing custody evaluations, and emotionally draining negotiations. Emily attempted to portray herself as the ever-doting mother, deserving of primary custody, but my lawyer was ready for her. We presented the evidence of her neglect, the school events she'd missed, the nights she spent with Mark, the out-of-town hotel stays. It wasn't a pretty picture, but it was the honest truth. To her credit, she didn't completely deny anything. She knew the evidence was irrefutable. Instead, she tried to shift the narrative, acknowledging that she had made mistakes, but insisting she was still the better parent, the more nurturing influence. The court remained unconvinced. When the judge finally made the ruling in my favor, awarding me primary custody of Ava and Liam, I felt an immense weight lifted from my chest, as if a physical burden had been removed. The children would remain in the home they loved, with the stability they desperately needed. Emily was granted visitation rights every other weekend and one evening during the week. I had braced myself for the financial fallout. With no prenuptial agreement in place, I knew she was entitled to some compensation, but I was determined not to let her bleed me dry. Ultimately, the court awarded her a modest amount of spousal support, enough for her to manage, but nowhere near the windfall she had probably envisioned. When the final verdict was delivered, Emily looked utterly defeated. Her self-assured facade had crumbled, replaced by the dawning realization that she wasn't going to walk away with everything she had expected. As we left the courtroom, she stopped me in the hallway. Her voice was barely audible, a mere whisper. I never wanted it to end like this, Max. I never wanted to cause you pain. I stared at her, trying to muster even a sliver of sympathy, but all I felt was a profound sense of exhaustion, a weariness that went bone deep. Perhaps you should have considered that before you welcomed someone else into our marriage, I said, my voice flat. Then I turned and walked away without a backward glance. Starting over felt like taking a deep breath after holding it for an impossibly long time. I hadn't truly understood how much emotional baggage I'd been carrying until the divorce was finalized and Emily was officially out of my life. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up each morning dreading what fresh drama the day might bring. The house was quieter now, yes, but in the best possible way. No more undercurrent of tension, no more days of silent treatment, no more snide, passive-aggressive remarks. Ava and Liam adjusted far more quickly than I had anticipated. The kids, I've always believed, are stronger than we think. My priority became making sure their world felt secure as much as possible. So, I kept everything the same: school runs, bedtime stories, Saturday hikes. The big change was I could actually be present with them now without constantly dealing with the turmoil Emily had created. Those first few weeks were tough. Ava, being older, understood things better, I think. Her questions were the hardest. Is Mom ever coming back? She'd ask, or did you and Mom stop loving each other? I answered honestly, but I wasn't going to badmouth Emily to them. Your mom and I just want different things now, I told her one night, tucking her in. It doesn't change how much we both love you and Liam. It seemed to reassure her for the moment, but I knew those questions would resurface as she grew older. Liam, bless his heart, seemed more concerned with the present. As long as I was there to play soccer and make his favorite pancakes on the weekends, he was content. Emily moved into a small place across town. It was a far cry from the house we'd built together, but truthfully, that wasn't something I gave much thought to. She got a part-time job as a receptionist at a dentist's office. I'm sure it was a humbling experience for someone who'd spent her days planning elaborate Pinterest parties. Sometimes I'd get a text from her. In the beginning, it was about the kids, school events, grades, the usual things. But occasionally she'd hint at wanting a fresh start, wanting to fix things. I kept my replies brief and to the point. I wasn't going to go down that road again. Chloe became a more significant part of our lives, and she was wonderful with Ava and Liam. She didn't try to replace Emily, but she genuinely made an effort to be a positive influence. Ava loved having someone to talk to about art and music, and Liam thought it was so cool that Chloe knew how to fix a flat tire. Seeing my kids happy again, surrounded by people who cared about them, meant everything. One day, Chloe and I took them to a nearby state park. We hiked, had a picnic, and they splashed in the creek. On the way home, Ava whispered to me, "I like Chloe. She's nice." That single comment made everything worthwhile. I heard through the grapevine, and sometimes from Ava, that Emily was struggling. She was having trouble keeping up with bills and balancing work with seeing the kids. And unsurprisingly, Mark had disappeared. One evening when I picked up the kids from her apartment, I saw how much her life had changed. It was small, only 2 bedrooms, and filled with cheap furniture. She tried to brush it off, saying it's cozy, but the strained smile gave her away. Ava and Liam weren't exactly thrilled about their visits there, and I couldn't blame them. Emily seemed more focused on her phone than on them. Ava even mentioned once that her mom was texting someone a lot during their dinner. I didn't pry, but I suspected Emily was trying to fill the hole Mark left. As for me, I poured myself into rebuilding. My business was flourishing now that I wasn't constantly dealing with emotional chaos, and I could finally focus on the things that truly mattered. Every now and then, I wonder how things might have been if Emily hadn't cheated, if she hadn't wanted that open marriage, if she'd just been honest. But those thoughts don't stay long. I knew I was better off even if getting here was messy. One afternoon, cleaning out the garage, I found an old photo album Emily and I had made years ago. It was full of pictures from our early days, road trips, holidays, the kids' first birthdays. I closed it and put it back on the shelf. That chapter was closed and I wasn't revisiting it. Emily wanted freedom, excitement, something new. And she opened a door, one I gladly walked through. Now I had my freedom, my kids, and a future I was looking forward to. As for Emily, she's dealing with the consequences, and honestly, I don't feel a thing.